Welcome to today's Icelandic National League of the United States presentation. I'm Rob Olesen, your host for this presentation, and I'm so happy you're here joining us today. This webinar is part of the INLUS mission to provide programs, classes, and other offerings that create a connection point for Icelanders, people of Icelandic descent, and those interested in Iceland. Information on the INLUS can be found on our social media sites, our blog, and our website at inlus.org. If you're already a member of the INLUS, we thank you. If you're not a member, I encourage you to join with us. Your membership helps fund scholarships, grants, local projects, Icelandic language classes, and other initiatives. Before we get started, a couple of reminders. This program is approximately 1 hour in length and is being recorded. The recording will be available through the INLUS website in a few days. As attendees to this program, you are muted. However, we welcome questions and will answer as many as possible in the program. To ask a question, please click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If you are on a phone or a tablet, the button may be in the upper right corner, or you may need to swipe to find it. Today's program features a new telling of a story that goes back to the settlement era of Iceland. Njal's saga is one of the most famous stories from this period, with much of the story set around the present-day city of Hvolsvöllur, which is about an hour-and-a-half drive to the east of Reykjavik. The town is the home of the Saga Center, where a group of fiber artists developed a plan to tell Njal's saga by stitching a tapestry that would illustrate the key points of the story. Our special guest today is Claudia Petursson. She discovered the Njal's Tapestry project in 2018 when the young son of friends visiting Iceland informed her he was on the hunt for Vikings. Claudia knew of the center in Hvolsvöllur, having visited it before on a family trip in 1997. A quick internet search revealed that the Saga Center would be open and ready to welcome them. They traveled to the center and found not only Vikings, but the Tapestry project, where she was invited to participate in the sewing. The first exposure led her to return to put in extended hours working on the project. In the process, she became a champion of the tapestry and is committed to bringing the story of this incredible effort to North America. This is the story of a small community in a small country that dreamed big and created a remarkable cultural and artistic work that they hope will be enjoyed for centuries to come. Thank you, Claudia, for joining us today, and I look forward to hearing more about Njal's Tapestry project.
Great, thank you so much, Rob. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. And hope you can all see that. And my little pointer. All righty. So yes, the Njal Saga Tapestry project of Iceland. So let us begin with these facts. Did you know that on February 2nd, 2013, in the town of Hvolsvöllur in South Iceland, the community began sewing a 90-meter-long tapestry depicting Iceland's most famous saga, Njal's saga? That they gave themselves 10 years to complete the project and finished 2.5 years early on September 15, 2020, and that visitors from 6 continents and over 150 countries have sewn on the tapestry, creating it with 12,518 discrete entries of sewing at completion. So I wanted to start with these impressive facts because they're astonishing once you understand where Hvolsvöllur is and what it is. So why Hvolsvöllur? Hvolsvöllur, Iceland is a small town. It's of just over 1,000 people. And as Rob said, it's 1.5 hours east of the capital city of Reykjavik on the Ring Road. It's about 45 minutes west of the famous columns of Vik that I'm sure people in our audience have visited. And Hvalsvöllur sits in the middle of the Rhine River plain. And this plain is mentioned in Njal saga over and over again. It's one of the most fertile and historic parts of the country. And our infamous friend, Eyjafjallajökull, the volcano that shut down European airports, I think it was for a month, it overlooks the river plain and is mentioned in the saga in 4 chapters, 124, 26, 45, and 49 to be exact. So on my first visit to Hvalsvöllur, I understood why there had been so much fighting in this area. You read it in the sagas and then you think, okay, they're fighting about this part of the country or that part of the country. But when you actually see it, it's the only large stretch of fertile land in the whole country. So it makes sense that it was really coveted. And the little town of Hvalsvöllur sits in the middle of it. It sits in the heart of saga country. So what are the sagas? In English, we would use this word to describe an epic story. So for example, Star Wars or Lord of the Rings would be considered sagas. And this word is from Old Norse, and it actually means history. So in Icelandic, the word has also come to describe a monumental tale. And this would be something that includes real people and historical events, but it's mixed with the fantastical. And you can see here that I'm going to start sharing the images from the tapestry so that you get a sense of what it looks like and how they chose to depict this story. While sagas refer to actual people, they also exaggerate the abilities of their heroes. So, there's a character who can jump over an enormously wide river in one leap. And one of the famous characters in the saga, Gunnar, he fends off hordes of invaders single-handedly. So there's this reality. These people really did exist, and you can find their records if you're able to log into Íslendingabók. That's the database of all the genealogies of the Icelanders. You will find these characters. They did exist, but in the saga, they'll have these phenomenal abilities and be particularly wise or able to control their temper, which is a big Viking virtue. And these stories were written in medieval times, excuse me, between 1190 and 1320. They're considered masterpieces of world literature, similar to the Iliad or the Odyssey. And Njál saga, in the mind of the Icelanders, is considered the mightiest of the sagas. So to give you a sense of the importance in the culture, it is read from start to finish every year, all in one day, in the schools throughout Iceland. And this is typically done on November 16th, which is Icelandic Language Day. You'll also see it if you unfortunately run into the police, or maybe they're there to help you. The motto of the Icelandic police comes from chapter 70, and it says, Með lögum skal land byggja, with laws shall the land be built. It was typical for the Hvalsvöllur community to celebrate the National Independence Day on June 17th by sewing the tapestry in their national costumes. And they were serious about it. These are very fancy outfits. You could liken them to like a tuxedo, like a black tie outfit. And so here they are literally sitting in their black tie outfits and sewing their tapestry. So this is how important. This is a way of honoring this work. And you put on this costume for a very special day. And this was considered a special day and a special thing to do. So Njál saga, or more accurately, the story of burnt Njál, takes place mainly in the area surrounding Hvalsvöllur, and it recounts the friendship between a wise lawyer, this is Njal Thorgeirsson, and typically when you see him in the tapestry, he's holding the balance, the scales, to remind you that he's a lawyer. And apparently his advice was sound and benevolent and always turned out well for those who followed it. And his handsome friend who was accomplished and considered to have no equal, Gunnar Hamundusson af Hlíðarendi. But my thinking is that if he were Njal's equal in mind, he would have taken his advice better. And he was very, very bad at taking Njal's good advice. So why a tapestry? I'd like to introduce you to the founders. On the left, this is regional librarian Gunnhildur Ette Kristjánsdóttir. And on the right, Christina M. Bengtsson, who was a secondary history and language instructor. And given the nature of where they lived in this heart of Njal Saga country, they conceived the idea to present Njal Saga in the form of a tapestry as a novel way to present this famous Icelandic saga to a wider audience. So they engaged the marvelous talent of award-winning artist Kristína Ragna Gunnarsdóttir. And as you can see here, with the generosity and support of the local community, they embarked on this incredible endeavor. They took their inspiration from the 1,000-year-old Bayeux tapestry from northern France, and I hope some of our participants have seen this in person. The Bayeux tapestry details the Norman invasion of Britain in 1066, the Normans being descended from Norðmaður, or Vikings. And this tapestry is 70 meters long, in contrast to the 90 meters in Hvalsvellir. It was completely hand embroidered, it is believed, by British nuns. And there is much mystery concerning its origins. They don't know who commissioned it. They don't know why it was commissioned. There was an understanding that it was supposed to be displayed in the cathedral in Bayeux, but this didn't happen. And then, of course, incredible history of it being hidden and saved and almost burned and, hidden from the Nazis and all that kind of thing. And there's a new mystery. And the new mystery is that there is evidence that the iconic stitch that was used to sew the Bayeux tapestry may have come to France from Iceland. So that is a mystery I'm interested in investigating, and we'll see where it leads. The Njal Saga tapestry echoes the structure of Bayeux. So you'll see that along the top and the bottom, there are these bands. And then you have the central action happening in the middle of the tapestry. You also see a vertical band that begins the tapestry, and that's also echoed at the very end after the 90 meters are sewn. And then we have the very first starting image. And this is an image of Mörður, and he's one of the main protagonists seeking marriage for his highly favored daughter Unnur. And of course, this is the typical start of all disastrous stories. So Kristín Ragna, our artist, she's a modern artist, but she's also rooted in tradition. So she developed a method of storytelling through symbolic motifs that are found along the top and bottom borders of the tapestry. And this is a technique that's also borrowed from Bayeux. So you can see the echoes here. So we've got figures and this border. And then in her work, we've got a similar, people are fighting, and then another border, and then more action happening. And then she also wanted to include images from the local landscape. So here you can see a very famous mountain called Þríhyrningur, and this overlooks the town of Hvalsvellir, and it's mentioned in 13 chapters of the saga. And then we see another border that sort of changes our focus and then go into text. So this is similar to the structure of Bayeux. Another feature that Kristín Ragna took from Bayeux was to have these symbolic motifs in the bands. And they're like little codes, you could say. So this describes that characters are falling in love. We see two turtle doves. A bloody sword with grain indicates that there will be battle on farmland. And then we have an intertwined tree, and this illustrates that a family is either being created or family alliances are being bound together anew. Unlike Bayeux, the Njal Saga tapestry has chapter headings. So here we see along the top border, this is chapters 32 to 34. And Njal Saga has 159 chapters total. So you get a sense of the scale. You can also see that enough text was used to recount the story, but it was also limited to avoid the experience being too much of standing and reading. And so we can see here that Hafgether, she's one of the characters, she's right here, and she's complaining that she's not going to change her seat. She's been invited to a party, and Vikings were very structured in terms of who sat where and what rank that indicated that you had. And so she refuses to change seats for the woman who outranks her and is very rude about it. And her rival Bergthora responds by saying, you know, that she's not going to put up with this and that Hafgether is being rude and obnoxious. Anyway, a lot of text. In contrast to Bayeux, here we have one sentence. Here, a house is burned. So it's very indicative language. It's not something that's telling the story in terms of the actual saga text like we have in Njal, but it's just, you know, an indicator of what's going on, what the action is. Some of the text that is used is very iconic. So this is a line from the saga that is known by all Icelanders in the same way that we would know Shakespeare. And this text is spoken by Bergthora, Njal's wife. I don't want to give away too much of the story for those who haven't read it, but here Bergthora is given the option to save herself, and she responds with this famous line, Jeg var ung given Njáli. I was young when given to Njal, and she entwined her fate with his. Some of the images have no text at all and use very evocative imagery. So here the characters are entering a foggy forest where danger lurks, and the images speak for themselves. You see an axe that bad things are going to happen. You have a skull that indicates someone's going to die, and then you have the payment for the dirty deed. So I'd now like to describe this famous stitch that may have come to France from Iceland, and it's called a couching stitch or laid work. And I'm going to describe how an image is built. So first you see the control chart, and these were 90 meters printed in like 25-meter panels of the entire saga and all of the images that Christine Ragna drew. And these were printed on vinyl, and they were hung in the tapestry room so that we could refer to them. So you'd see this image, and then you would find the image on the tapestry itself and start first in this outline stitch. So there's nothing particularly unique about the outline stitch. It's something that, you know, anybody who's done embroidery has learned to do. But then you have this novel way of filling things in. So you have these long strands of wool that are going to fill in the body of the character, and then these little strands across that tack down those long strands. And so that's the way in which the figures are built. And you can see the difference. So the finished image has this richness and movement, but still retains the accuracy of the original sketch. And this is such an evocative medium. And this is why Gunhildur and Christina were so inspired to represent Njal Saga in tapestry. The handwork is engaging and human, and it just draws you into the story. So I'm going to share some more images so that you get a sense of this. You can see the passion here, the movement of lines of somebody speaking, the naturalness of how fabric would flow. So there's a lot of movement inherent in the images. Note the accuracy here of expressions and emotions evoked by using this type of embroidery stitch. And this is our starting character, Unnur, looking very unhappy with her current suitors. Of course, what would a Viking saga be without Viking boats? And then we've got plotting and darkness and stealth and fight and action. And this one is one of my favorite images, this soaring voice emanating from the tapestry from this character. So this catalog of images offers an amazing sense of what was being sewn here and what was being communicated. Moving to the tapestry field, the embroidery is sewn into pure woven linen, and Christine Rachna's images were scanned into digital files and then printed onto the 90 meters. So a very high-tech way of doing an ancient art. And they actually had to print 4 25-meter panels because the machine couldn't handle all 90 meters at the same time. So here you can see the tapestry being printed that was printed by the Berry Fabric Company in Hammarö, Sweden. The tapestry was sewn using pure Icelandic wool spun by local wool producer Ístex and hand-dyed by Gunhildur and Christina using native plants found in the landscape. And here to the left, you can see the abundant leaves collected in those ubiquitous IKEA bags. According to Gunhildur, these would be rowan, birch, and poplar leaves. And then on the right, they also use lupin leaves. And you can see these are the flowers that you see across Iceland. It's actually from Alaska, Alaskan lupin that was brought in to help with soil erosion. But they didn't use the purple for the flowers. They just used the leaves to make a beautiful yellow. So with the starting imagery of the tapestry, you can see the final color palette. And then again, the control charts that we used to check what colors we were sewing with. As I mentioned, this was a community endeavor. So here is Gunhildur's husband, August, and his colleagues, and they built the tapestry frame for us. And here is the setup on the eve of taking the first stitch. They actually had a ribbon cutting. So who had the honor of taking the very first stitch? This is World Adventurer Vilborg Arna Gisaradottir, and she took the first stitch on February 2nd of 2013. She is the first Icelandic woman to summit Everest and also the first Icelandic person to trek unsupported and alone to the South Pole, something I figure only Icelandic women would think of doing, but I'm sure there are others. It's just typical of the culture. She's an extraordinarily accomplished young woman, so it was an appropriate person to start a monumental project. And it is also believed that the tapestry is the longest continuous all hand-stitched embroidery on Earth. So a monumental endeavor for a very small town in Saga country. So how did I find the tapestry and become involved? I came across the tapestry, as Rob mentioned, in November of 2018. I took visiting friends to the Saga Center and was surprised to find the tapestry being sewn because it was typically not open the day that we went. I did not realize it was a crowd sewn project, and I actually started to cry when invited by the startled young woman in charge of the room that day. And she just, she's like, come on, you silly woman, just sew. And I said, no, you don't understand. This is Gunnar and Njal. She thought I was strange. Anyway, here you can see the sewing packets. This is in the tapestry room itself. And these were sold to support the project and also allow people to take home a highlight and work on it back in their country. And also over here, we see the tapestry laid out and 2 of the people sewing. So this is what the room looked like. If you see the length of the part that we worked on, it was probably about, I think they had like 10 meters out at a time. And in this photo, I'm in the foreground on the left, taking my very first stitches. And on the right, you'll notice here's that structure. So we've got these horizontal bands. And we have these lines that frame the bands, 1, 2, 3, and 4. This line was sewn in the outline stitch. and it continues from the very first stitches of the tapestry to the very end. And this is the place where anyone could sew or learn to sew. No experience was needed. And you could practice and, get more expert as desired. There are parts of this line that are really not good looking. But one of the founding principles was that the tapestry was to be the work of many hands and not to privilege expertise. So you have a very varied, honest, and beautiful set of lines along these borders. Here is a picture of what's called roll-up day. So they're pulling the staples out of the side of the frame. And this is because all of this exposed area has been sewn and is completed. And then it's rolled up, and you can see the great big roll of what's already been done. And roll-up day was a big deal, and usually the national TV would come, and the event would be broadcast on the nightly news, and they would get an update as to how many meters had been completed. So it was a crowd-sewn project, and it was a national interest project. When putting this presentation together, I was surprised to find this Facebook entry about me on the Njal Saga website. I didn't realize that they'd put this up. So not only was it a dream to find this project and to sew a saga, but it was also a dream for someone like me who has been engaged in handwork of all kinds my whole life. And there were times when I was sewing that I thought about the fact that 1,000 years later, people are still coming to see the Bayeux tapestry. And I wondered if people would be looking at this tapestry 1,000 years later, and I sometimes just couldn't sew. I would be so overwhelmed at the thought. This is the main character that I was invited to sew. His name is Gissur Kvitiv. And you can also see kind of where, and he's from Mosfellsbyr. That's where the wool was spun at the Aulafoss Woolen Mill. And he's kind of a main character. He's mentioned in 30 chapters of the saga. And he's also a bit of a troublemaker, which we can kind of see from his demeanor. This is my final image sewn, which is very close to the end of the tapestry. And I did not sew this one, but this is the final image before the closing border. And it is of Hildegunn Starkaradottir and Kári Solmundarson. And it says, Olik þá Brenna-Njáls sögu. And here ends the saga of the burning of Njal. I had amazing teachers, and these people deserve a shout out. So this is Sigga. She's the first person to invite me to sew and the one who had to put up with my strange tears. And here we have Christina. She's the one who invited me to sew Gissur Kvitiv. And then Gunnhildur, who is one of the founders. Christina and Gunnhildur are two of the founders. Gunnhildur trusted me to sew all by myself in the center, which I was so honored by. This is Gulla. She was an honest critic who let me know when my work was excellent or needed more attention. And Sigrun. Sigrun, whose accuracy and clarity are a gift to this tapestry. Here we see these curves that she sewed. And this is so difficult to get this accuracy on curves with all these little pie pieces. You just have to have a sense of sort of knowing where the work is going. And it is really difficult. And as you can see, just stunningly beautiful. So as her father described, she certainly has the measure within her. And as I said, this was a truly crowd-sewn project. So we have a little catalog of the people who came to put their mark on this. The current Prime Minister of Iceland, Katrín Jakobsdóttir, Lilja Alfreðsdóttir, who is the Minister of Tourism, and her daughter came as well. And celebrity of celebrities, Vigdís Finnbogadóttir, who was the former president of Iceland and was such a champion of Icelandic culture during her presidency. She just went around the world singing the praises of Iceland and having the world take notice of this mighty little country. As I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, it took 12,518 discrete entries of sewing to complete the 90 meters. Every entry is written in a logbook with the name of the person, the date, what they sewed, and where they are from. And this is an incredible archive, which I really want to look into and just look for clues and notice. I'd love to catalog it, frankly, like to see where the majority of people came from, what their ages were, things like that. So one day. So who came to sew? Everybody from every walk of life. You see school children. One of my favorite stories is of a woman who dragged her husband to sew. And then when she was ready to leave, she couldn't get him to leave because he wanted to keep sewing. This is my husband, Ingvar. He's in the upper left. He did not have to be dragged to sew, I'm happy to say. And he enjoyed adding his stitches to the practice line and to history. From Slovenia, from Spain. And one day when I was sewing, we had England, Hungary, United States, and Sweden. So you get a sense of just the array of people that were interested and came to sew. This is another of my favorite stories. This is Professor Avadan Raggio, and she came from Colorado to sew 3 separate times. And what I love is on her university contact page, her official, if you say professor photo, is of her sewing the tapestry. Since this project was inspired by Bayeux, it only made sense to contact the real thing. So in April of 2019, you can see here the Kvalsvetter group reached out and they visited Bayeux. They presented the director, Antoine Vernet, this sample from the tapestry, and he was very proud to receive it, very pleased to be connected to this project. And it is now displayed in the museum with other gifts from around the world that celebrate embroidery inspired by the Bayeux tapestry. So as I described, the tapestry was started on February 2nd, 2013, and the community gave themselves 10 years to complete it. In November of 2018, you can see here, the 6th of November, they had 7.5 meters left, and it looked like they would finish sooner than 10 years. But then COVID happened, and the Saga Center had to be closed with no more input from the public. So a little small bubble of local sewers were allowed to continue. And on September 15th of 2020, you see here, Gunhildur is taking the last stitch. And this privilege was reserved to her for her dedication and perseverance. And she was quite honored. So here are our founders celebrating: Christina, Gunhildur, Kristín Ragna, and this is Lilja Einarsdóttir. She was the local mayor at the time and was a great champion of the tapestry. And of course, a huge thank you to the world who came to sew. So what next? It's now time to tell the world. That's what we're doing here tonight. So here we see Gunhildur by the completed tapestry, which is being stored in the attic of a community center. And I do not like this picture because all this beautiful work is being stored away, and I would like the world to see it. So we are working on making that possible. In order to spread the word, the Kvalsvetter group is now working on a traveling tapestry. And you can see the group that is sewing here. They meet every Tuesday night from 7 to 10. And in October this past year, Diane Okonski, the INLUS president, visited Godaland Community Center, where they're now sewing this tapestry. It has highlights from Njal Saga. It's 5 meters long, portable, and intended to tell the world. So here we see Diane observing the tapestry and even sewing a few stitches. So hopefully when this comes to visit your community, you'll be able to see her stitches amongst the many thousands of others. And they presented Diane with this beautiful sample. These are Höskuldur and Hrut. They show up in the 2nd chapter of Njal Saga and are protagonists. And they wrote to Diane, "Dear Diane, we are so happy to be joined in the weaving together of Icelanders, both here and in North America. May the bonds of our community grow and remain strong, with blessings from the Njal Saga Tapestry community. So once I found the Njal Saga Tapestry project, I became interested in what was going on in the world of tapestry. I had come to realize that this process of tapestry is a great way to tell a story and is also a wonderful way to bind a community with a common goal. So these are some things I found. There is a Game of Thrones tapestry. It is also 90 meters long, and it's made in 11 panels, so it's not continuous like the Njal Saga tapestry. The body of the tapestry was woven on machine loom, and then these little figures were all outlined by a closed community of 100 experts, so no crowd sewing. This is one made in Scotland that celebrates the Battle of Prestonpans, which was the battle for succession in Scotland in 1745. This one is also not continuous. It's made in panels and again, just experts. It was a closed group of 250 sewers. This one's more along the lines of what would be considered a crowd-sewn project. This is the Scottish diaspora tapestry. It's also not continuous, made in half-meter squares, but it had a more inclusive group of 700 sewers from 30 countries. So here's an idea for us. What about a River of Icelanders in North America tapestry, where each community would sew the history of their region and then sew all the pieces together to show the settlement of Icelanders across North America? By the way, this map is on the INLUS website and it is interactive. So you can click on various areas and see the history of Icelandic settlement. And it would be a great resource for a settlement tapestry. So what is next for the Hvolsvöllur community and Njal Saga? They started a nonprofit to steer the future of the tapestry. They signed an agreement to display the tapestry in the Lava Center. And the display space is being designed along with a hotel, which will be fantastic for visitors in the area because right now there really is almost zero hotel space. The tapestry display will link the Lava Center to the hotel, and it may also serve as a concert space. And I just get overwhelmed at the idea of sitting there with this 90 meters of this story surrounding you in the place where it actually happened. So the Lava Center also ties the tapestry to all the volcanic and geological sites in the area. And as we've mentioned, these play a big part in Njal Saga. All right. And the Icelandic government has been very generous and helpful. At the completion of the tapestry, they were given a gift of 25 million crowns, which sounds like such a huge amount of money. It's about $180,000 in US dollars, but 25 million crowns just sounds like an enormous sum, and hopefully they will give more. So we'd like you to keep in touch and spread the word. And here are ways that you can. First, share this webinar. You can stay in touch at the Njal Saga website and get much more information and updates about the tapestry. During COVID, I made this series for the National Nordic Museum in Seattle, and you'll find out about ordering tapestry kits on these videos. This map is also interactive. It's a Saga location map. So it's one of my most favorite things to use when I'm reading the saga. So they'll mention that, let's say these people went to, Thríhyrningur, or they went to the Rang River, and you can click in the body of the saga on these place names that are hot and see exactly where it is. Phenomenal way to plan your next tour of your favorite saga sites. There is a fabulous Facebook page. The entire Facebook feed from planning to completion is all public. Find out more about Kristín Ragna and her work at her website. If you're interested in fiber, Ístex is basically the biggest, I think maybe the only wool producing company in Iceland, and it's actually 80% owned by the farmers. So a fun company to check out. If you happen to be in Hvalsvöllur, please stop in at Sveitabúðin Unna. They carry tapestry items and also locally produced items, which is really important to the local community. The wonderful Elsto Art Cafe is a place for a great meal, and it's actually a pottery. So while you're eating, you're eating your meal on pottery that they have made, and they have some nice Njal Saga tie-ins. And make sure to visit the Lava Center. This is where the tapestry exhibit will be housed, along with the new hotel. And they have some very important partners that I wanted to highlight. The Geopark, the National Weather Service, and the culture office for the Southland of Iceland, and also the civil defense. So when you go in there, they're kind of tied into these official channels. So it's not just a tourist site, even though it is privately owned. And in closing, I found these lovely comments on the Facebook page. They are accurate. I agree with them immensely. And this is my most favorite photo of anyone who ever sewed. This is Lovisa, and her face just says community accomplishment joy. That is what a project like this can do. So keep in touch for updates. Thank you all for joining us to hear about the Njal Saga Tapestry project. And back to you, Rob, for our Q&A.
Well, thank you for that lovely presentation, Claudia. It was very informative. And we have a couple of questions or a couple of comments that I'll read to you that were in the Q&A. But I'd just like to say we've got about 15 minutes left. So if people have any questions, you can go ahead and click that Q&A button, type them in, and we will present them to Claudia. Doug Hansen, who is our tech person behind all of the work here today, I'd like to thank him as well. And he did want to add one little correction, Claudia. That settlement area map is actually on the Icelandic Roots website, not on the INLUS website. So if you went to the INLUS website, you would not find it, but you would find it on the IcelandicRoots.com website. So I'll just clear that up. Thank you, Doug, for that.
Good.
And I'm just going to pull up. One of the questions was, are the sample kits you talked about still available to purchase today? And I think you kind of alluded to that in your links at the end there, but do you want to go ahead and make a comment about that?
They are available. You'll get the information if you look at the videos. I also don't want to deluge INLUS, but maybe people could contact you and say, hey, could you put us in touch with Claudia for the kits? I'm happy to do that because it really does help the project to get funding. And as I say, there is government support, there is local support, but there also needs to be private support. So I'm happy to help in any way. So if you want to funnel contacts to me through INLUS, or go to the video series, and it will describe that you can buy them from the National Nordic Museum in Seattle.
Well, great, thanks. And you also mentioned several different websites, and I believe that when the recording of this session is available online, that we will be able to include those links in the comments or whatever it is below that. So, people keep an eye out for that. If you're looking for those links, it's a little hard to write them all down. I was trying to write a couple of them down, but I didn't get them all. And they look like some great links. So another comment is, my, oh my, amazing. Your presentation and storytelling is wonderful. I've seen some of the major medieval tapestries at the cloisters in New York. Amazing. Besides the great effort to make it, what are the people doing to ensure or endow the tapestry to make certain that it's still around 600 years from now?
Well, that is my favorite question. So Icelanders are really good. I have to say they are really good about preservation. And, we can see from the saga, they take their history very seriously. So all kinds of experts have been brought in to build the display cases. They will have, temperature regulation, light regulation. And then I was even learning about what they would do if there was a fire, how quickly they would come in and basically like dismantle everything, grab it and run. So um, so there is a lot of expertise being brought in and a real attitude of taking this seriously, which is why not only do I not like seeing the tapestry sitting in an attic, but it also is not in its optimal preservation environment when it's sitting there. So the sooner we get it out and displayed, the better. Um, there are ways to donate to help. The difficulty comes in whether or not you get a tax break. So you can very happily send money to you'll find the address on the Butler, the Saga Center site. But that's just out of the generosity of your heart. It's not going to fall into sort of a US nonprofit scenario. But anyway, they'd love to hear from you. They'd love to receive your donation. Whatever moves your heart, please follow it.
Well, wonderful. We have just going down through some more of these. And another comment says, I hope you do get to make that catalog of who came to sew, all those 12,500 people. That would really be a neat thing to see.
Yes, I think so. And what surprised me when I was looking at sort of at these other tapestries was this real exclusivity. And I understand when you want to make something beautiful, you want people to be practiced and to do a good job. But there is also something lovely about that living, seeing the hand of someone's work. And so we have children and we have the elderly, and we had one man sewing on the tapestry who was starting to lose his sight. And he just kept sewing and sewing and sewing. It was so important to him. And people said, from the day that he started to the day that he finished, you could see a change in his work. But that's the point.
So it's really it's not just a snapshot of this epic story, but also of the community that came and helped make this
Exactly.
possible.
Exactly.
Another question is, what are the plans for the traveling tapestry? It's not finished. They're still working on it, but what will happen with that?
So the hope with the traveling tapestry is that it's a way to spread the word so that when people decide they're going to take a trip to Iceland, they'll include this in their itinerary. And it's also a way to spread the possibility of doing different types of handwork. And as I say, this dream of, let's say, the settlement communities in North America decide to make their own tapestry. So it's to inspire, to spread the word. And I'm a real advocate of handwork. It's of all kinds. I mean, it doesn't, I knit, I sew, I embroider, but woodworking, anything, building a house, laying a wall, anything that you do with your hands is going to ground you and give you peace of heart. And the more that we do this as a society, the better off we're going to be.
All right. We do have one more question. If anybody else wants to throw one in, now's a good time. This one is more of a comment about this sounds like an epic tale, the creation of this tapestry. Has anyone made a book about it? Or maybe like a
Not
children's book?
right, not yet, but definitely needs to be done. I was approached by a documentary filmmaker who was very interested in just recording the story. But I think that we need a film, we need books. Children's book would be great. But also, yeah, to say who did this, because that's the great mystery with Bayeux. Nobody knows. There's all kinds of speculation and there are hints and there are clues, but nobody knows. And Icelanders, again, being so good at recording their history, let's have a saga of the saga.
Exactly.
Mm.
I had a kind of an oddball question that I wanted to ask about. Earlier on, you mentioned the ubiquitous IKEA bags. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? I think with a tapestry that's 90 meters long, that I was imagining how much yarn and would that take, and the people that did all that dyeing. What happens when you run out of that blue or
Exactly. Um, I do not know how many yards of yarn were used, and I've asked them to figure it out because if we're going to write a book, we need to have these statistics. I also think it's a great, what would I say, like a great plug for Ístex. If Ístex wants to, advertise their own wool and say, look what our wool can do. So that's the wool side. The dyeing side, there's a great, if you go to the Facebook feed in the very beginning, there are a lot of photos of what it took to dye all this wool. And it was a lot of trial and error, a lot of practice, a lot of things that didn't work out. You could actually buy the discarded wool in the tapestry center, colors that weren't quite right. So you'll see in that photo feed, it's really delightful to see the perseverance and all the things that they had to do to get those colors. And they're all landscape plants that made the colors, except for the red. They had to use beets because there wasn't anything that could make that color. But Icelanders are big beet eaters. So even if that's not a native plant, it's certainly a native food.
well, that's amazing. I guess we do have one more question about the yarn,
Yeah.
and that is what was the yarn weight used? By weight, they mean the thickness of the yarn.
So that is a good question, and I'm not enough of an expert on like, if it's worsted or if it's well, I can't think of the baby sized yarn, but I would say it's sort of a typical embroidery yarn. It's not as thick as a needlepoint yarn. It is a two ply, but it's closer to, let me think here. It's obviously not as fine as sewing thread, and it's not as thick as a needlepoint yarn. So I'm going to say it's like right in the middle. And I would love to find out what they actually called it, and maybe I can get that answer to you.
Okay. And I guess a follow-up on that. Oh, well, I guess the follow-up was that the lupin plant wouldn't have been around during the time of Njal either.
This is
The
correct. And
time.
it's not native, and it's a very controversial plant. It was brought in, I think, in the 1960s. It's native to Alaska, but the soil erosion in Iceland had become so extreme that it was threatening farmland, and it just became a compromise. It was like, we have to do this, or we won't have any place to grow food. So it is not native. That is correct. Apparently, though, according to Gunhildur, it makes a great yellow. Oh, I guess it's what do you say? I said Christine Rachna, she was an artist that had tradition and roots, but also was modern. And so here's a modern application.
And speaking of Kristen Ragna, was it how much time did she spend coming up with the design? Was I, when you talk about trying to have this decade of building this,
Mhm.
did she already have the design done before, what was her
Yeah.
design work time part of that decade, or was that in addition?
That was, as I understand, that was in addition. They gave themselves 10 years to sew. So her preliminary work, and again, you can see that in the Facebook feed. I want to say maybe they were starting in 2011. She does have a great presentation though about her whole development of the pictures, and maybe that's something that could be a webinar.
Hmm. Well, yeah, wonderful. Um, I is there anything else that you would like to say about it? I'm checking our feed here, and I think um, I'm not seeing any more questions that anyone else wanted to throw out. I'm just wondering if you had any other final closing thoughts before we end our seminar or webinar.
I would just say stay in touch so that we can update you on the progress. And the best thing will be able to say it's open, it's ready for viewing. Come and get tickets, plan your trip. There's even a hotel to stay in.
Yeah,
And
and
then
that
and then and then and then sew yourself or pick up some kind of handwork. Do that thing that you've always wanted to do. That's what these people did. And that's
mhm.
what so impressed me. This is a tiny town of 1,000 people, and they got so many no's. They got so many people saying no one cares. Nobody likes the sagas. And actually, let me finish with a final story. One of the people who helps with the Saga Center is a man named Friedrich Erlingsson, and he was actually a founding member of the Sugar Cubes band that Björk was in. And he's very, very committed to preserving Icelandic history. So there's a farm, if you're driving out to Hvalsvatnir, I would say maybe 15 minutes from the town. If you turn left off the ring road, and you'll probably go about 6 miles, part of it's paved and then it gets unpaved. You come to a farm called Keldur. And Friedrich happened to be out there one day. And these people drove up in a car and they stopped and they looked around and they looked kind of lost and he said, "Can I help you?" And they said, "Yeah, we're looking for Gunnar." So he's like, "Gunnar who?" And they're like, "Gunnar from the saga." And he's like, "Oh, okay, Gunnar from the saga. Yeah." And he starts giving directions of where they can go and see things. And they drove away, and he said to himself, "I have heard rumors of people like this, but there really are people like this." And I'm one of these people. I took my kids to Gunnar's farm back in 1997. That's when we first found the Saga Center. And Icelanders don't believe it. They think, oh, it's just our history, and the rest of the world doesn't care. But the rest of the world really cares and is really interested. And the more resources there are to be able to come to that area and to follow these little trails and use these interactive maps and to stand looking at there's a famous view that is the reason that Gunnar couldn't leave his homeland. And you can stand there and look at it. You can stand and look out and say, "I get why he couldn't leave. It's just too beautiful." So go and find, come and see.
That's a wonderful story to end this on, Claudia. Thank you so much for
Yes,
your
you're welcome. Thank
presentation
you.
today.
Thank you,
And
everybody.
yes, and thank everyone who came here and listened to our um, conversation today, and who has later joined the recording. We've had some interesting questions, and I appreciate everyone who participated in helping us do this talk today. Before we close today's program, I just want to remind everyone that the recording will be available on the INLUS website at inlus.org. And there you'll also find many other interesting video presentations as well as our quarterly newsletter. And be sure to check out our event calendar on the website, which includes listings of local Icelandic club activities. There may be an upcoming event in your area. And also, looking ahead on our next INLUS webinar, you can listen to a conversation with members of the United States Embassy in Iceland. Learn about their mission and the functions of this important group. That online discussion will take place on Thursday, January 18th, 2024. The details and the link to the webinar are on the INLUS event calendar. I want to again thank you, Claudia Petursson, for this fine presentation this hour. And to our viewers, thanks for joining us on this webinar, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.